What's up, you guys? My name is Aubrey and this is my channel, and today I want to talk about scams and internet scams and money scams, but specifically in relation to the gig economy. Now, we hear stories all the time of people who get scammed out of money, whether it be people getting scammed out of their retirement fund, scammed out of their house, scammed out of a large amount of money, whatever the case is. You hear stories like this, I would say, quite frequently. And I feel like whenever these stories are published online, the person who is scammed, so the scammy, they are oftentimes framed in a negative light, in a light in which they are portrayed as being stupid or being an idiot or being a moron for falling for this scam. But the fact is that scams are getting more and more sophisticated, and you don't have to be a moron in order to fall for a scam. In fact, you can be a very intelligent, a successful person and still fall for these multi-six-figure scams if the scammer who's scamming you is good enough at their job. So in today's video, I want to talk about some of the different types of scams that are in the gig economy. I'm going to talk about some of the red flags to look out for and how to protect yourself from being scammed in the gig economy. So let's get started. Now, before we begin, I would like to thank the sponsor of this video, Cover. Now, what Cover is it's a financial safety net for gig workers. And Cover provides a handful of the benefits that we've grown used to with a traditional 9-to-5. With Cover, you can have access to paid time off, sick leave, and cash advances when you need it. You can also have access to a medical and telehealth professionals, bookkeeping services, as well as a legal team in the case that your account is wrongfully terminated. Cover is super affordable, starting at just $7 per month. But if you follow the link in my description below, as well as the link in the comment section of this YouTube video, if you follow that link, you can get 1 free month of Cover with no contracts and no long-term commitments. And so if you're interested in supporting me, if you're interested in supporting this YouTube channel, I would definitely check that out. You will not regret it. And I really do think if you're a gig worker, Cover is a must-needed tool. Thank you, Cover, for sponsoring this video. So let's just jump right into it and talk about what types of situations foster a scammer to scam a scammy. Now, I'm not one who is victim blaming here. I don't want to insinuate that I think it's the scammy's fault whenever they get scammed, but I do think it's important to take this into account because this is incredibly critical when you're thinking of how to avoid getting scammed. Now, a scammer is going to look for somebody who's vulnerable and desperate when they're looking for somebody to scam. The reason is because the more desperate you are, the less likely it is that you'll stop and think about what's happening in order to avoid any sort of sketchy situations. If you're vulnerable, if you're desperate, you just want something to happen. You want something to happen quickly, and you may overlook some key red flags that you may have noticed otherwise. So that is incredibly important. If you're somebody who is desperate for money, if you're somebody who's feeling vulnerable, if you're going out there and getting a side gig, it's probably best to try to come off as confident and as stable as possible. You don't want other people to get the vibe that you are either vulnerable or desperate, because that really will foster a situation of being taken advantage of. And so with that, let's dig into the very first red flag, and that is if something seems too good to be true, chances are that it is. This is something that I've been told my entire life, and it's something that I've reiterated time and time again as I've gotten older, because this statement really rings true even today. If somebody is making extravagant claims, if somebody is claiming that you can make 6 figures while working only part-time, if somebody is making claims that you can go from making, minimum wage at your part-time job to making 6 figures income in 6 short months, if somebody's claiming that you can travel around the world, only work 5 hours a week and make 7 figures, all of these things are just simply too good to be true, and they seem too good to be true because they are. These claims are just simply not true. Now, I'm not saying that it's totally impossible to do any of these things successfully. It probably is, and there are probably people that have done it. But the chances of you going from, working a minimum wage job to making 7 figures, it's very slim, and it's very slim to be able to do that in a really quick amount of time. And this is especially true in the context of a side gig. I mean, more often than not, a side hustle is not going to turn into a 6 or 7 figure income stream. I mean, it definitely can, but it's not the norm. And so if you are being sold that this 7-figure lifestyle is within reach in the form of a side gig, that seems too good to be true, and it's most likely because it is. So if you're being sold extravagant claims, if you're being sold this luxurious lifestyle, if you're being told these huge income potential numbers, these are all red flags because it is simply most likely too good to be true. The next red flag is one that's incredibly important to remember, because this is where I think people can really lose a lot of money. If you are taking part in a side gig that requires for you to spend money up front, this is a scam, and I would stay far, far away from this. This is oftentimes discussed in the form or in the context of multi-level marketing schemes, where you have to buy all of these products and you sell those products to your friends, and then they have to buy a lot of products from you, and then they sell it to their friends. It's a pyramid scheme, but this exists in other forms as well. For example, this type of scheme exists in the world of medical billing. Well, you'll get hired on to do medical billing. You'll be required to buy all of this software, all of this program stuff to complete the medical billing job, and then they'll just ghost you once you've bought the software. And you'll end up spending $1,000 to $2,000 on the software to do the side gig, and then you'll just be out of that money and you'll have no legit side gig to fall back on. This happens all the time in different shapes and different forms, but it's important to understand that if you are working for a legit company, if you're working for a legit side gig opportunity, regardless of what that is, if you are required to spend money up front, run far, far away. I've been doing the gig economy for a long time, and I've been doing consulting work even longer than that. And I have never had to spend money up front in order to take part in that side gig. It's always at the cost of the person I'm working for. It's always at the cost of the company. It's never something that I had to personally pay for. So if you're having to foot the bill for anything that needs to be purchased before you actually start making money, this is a big red flag. The next red flag that I have is that if the person or the company or the side gig you're working for, if they give you far too much information, like an overwhelming amount of information, chances are there is something sketchy going on. This is something that my dad always told me growing up, and I've always kept it in the back of my mind as I've gotten older. In fact, in school, I did it quite a lot. Whenever I was in school and I didn't know the answer to a question in an essay, or I didn't know the topic of an essay that needed to be written, I would oftentimes write way more than what was required, with the hope that the teacher would just skim the paper and not actually dive into the content I was talking about. This was like my way of fluffing up the information. That way they didn't realize that there was no substance at all presented in front of them. Whenever you're given too much information in the context of the gig economy or work or making money, this is the exact same thought process. Somebody overloads you with a ton of information that you don't even realize that you're not receiving any information at all. You're just receiving a ton of fluff. It's a whole big smoke and mirror charade. Now, that's not to say that everybody or every company that gives you too much information is a scam. This is one of those things that's definitely on a case-by-case basis. So it's not to say that like just because somebody gives you information means that they're not legit. But I do think it's definitely a red flag. And if you feel like you're given too much information on a very consistent basis, if you feel like you're always being presented new info but you're not getting any substance, this is definitely a red flag that whoever's giving you that information is trying to fluff up their sales pitch. They're trying to fluff up their company, and they're definitely doing that intentionally. So this isn't necessarily a red flag where I just like immediately run away, but it's definitely one where I would keep an eye on things and I would definitely proceed cautiously. So now that we know some of the red flags to look out for, now begs the question of how do you ensure that you're not going to get scammed in the future? Now, my first tip in regards to this is that if you're somebody who's new to taking part in the gig economy, if you've never done a side hustle before, I would encourage you to work with some of the well-known platforms rather than working for some random person or random company. What I mean by this is I would encourage you to work with platforms like Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, Turo, Airbnb, and so much more. There are so many different gig economy platforms out there where you will definitely be able to find one that fits you, fits your schedule, and fits your needs, but one that is also backed by a reputable company. That way you can ensure that you'll be protected, you'll be ensured that you'll get paid, you'll know that you're not getting scammed, and there'll be safeguards put into place in order to protect you, the gig worker. So if you're new to the gig economy, I would definitely encourage going that route rather than going rogue on your own. Now, the second tip that I have is that if you're taking part in the gig economy, not in the form of a gig platform service, but just like kind of on your own in the form of maybe doing website work, maybe doing catering, maybe baking cakes or doing things like that, I would always encourage you to take a deposit up front. Now, that deposit should be, I think, at least 50% of the overall invoice cost. For example, if you run an at-home bakery and you make cakes for people and somebody orders a $500 cake for a wedding, do not make that $500 cake until you have at least $250 of that up front. At least $250. This way, if the person decides that they are canceling the wedding or they don't want to pick up the cake or they've changed their mind, you're not out of the time and money it took you to make that cake. You can at least cover a portion of your cost. Then whenever the person comes and picks up the cake, they owe the rest of that $500 invoice. Now, this is something that I hear happen all of the time, especially with small-time business owners and small-time gig workers. People that complete work for somebody, they agreed to get paid after the work is completed, and then they never end up getting paid. By taking at least a 50% deposit, you're protecting yourself and your time from getting screwed over. So regardless of what type of hustle you're taking part in, whether you're mowing lawns, whether you're baking goods, whether you're making custom clothing, whatever whatever the case is, always take 50% upfront if it's a made to order item. Ultimately, though I don't think getting scammed is something that is an immediate threat to every single person out there, I do think it's something to be aware of, and I think it's something that everybody should be actively protecting themselves against. So with that being said, I would love to hear your thoughts, so make sure to leave a comment down below, and while you guys are at it, make sure to hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell, and I will see you guys in the next video.